Well, I'm going to call the meeting to order and welcome to everybody. By way of introduction, just tell me something that happened in the last 30 days that was really interesting. And we're going to start right here with Matt, who looks perplexed by the way.
I can go. I can go.
Okay.
I had a lot of fun going to the dedication of the Lake Forest Park Street to. Yes, were you there?
I was not there, but I was
Tracy.
excited when I heard.
Tracy was very an integral part of making that happen, and it was a wonderful event. And their speakers, all the speakers were great, and I was so excited to be there. And so that's leads to a question as to whether or not we should do Parable of the Sower as our next book club book. So just putting that out there.
Yes. Be a good idea.
To ride on the coattails of that event.
And then we can invite all sorts of people. What a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
So, okay.
You got a book club, at least up on the score. Then I will be right.
Yes, and we all you can,
Oh, that's right.
Oh, we can say.
all we can say. Yeah, and I think Patricia will like that.
Yes, probably.
So I don't, it's at 37th, and is it that road that goes up the hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, between 165th and 162nd.
All right, do you, how many of you remember her riding a bicycle around town? I do. She used to ride her bicycle. She didn't drive, she just rode a bicycle. Okay, somebody else, what's one thing that happened to you this month?
I'll go. We just came back from Crater Lake, which was absolutely amazing. If any of you have ever been, it's so cool. It's just so I've never seen like a blue color like that. 'Cause it's the only, there's no streams like running into the lake. It's just magnificent.
Wonderful.
Terrific.
I remembered something.
Okay, Matt.
So I'm a, I guess, nerd fighter. So the Vlogbrothers YouTube channel, John Green, the author of The Fault in Our Stars, did a video a couple weeks ago about how bedaquiline, which is a drug used to treat multi-drug resistant TB, which is patented by Johnson & Johnson. The patent was supposed to expire, and so the drug would be cheaper in the developing world, and Johnson & Johnson was trying to get the patent extended. And then he made a video about it and said, hey, everyone, let's, let Johnson & Johnson know what we think about that. And Johnson & Johnson came out with a statement a couple days later, which was, we were never going to extend this patent. It's unfair to characterize us as the bad guy here. But the World TV, I forget what organization, but an organization devoted to, fighting TB in the developing world, said, after tense negotiations, Johnson & Johnson has agreed to allow us to make generic bedaquiline in certain countries.
Fabulous.
And that was like, they were just losing it. Like, oh, this community has never done something with that much impact before.
Nice.
And did you have your hand up?
I did. And I just want to mention, if you've never actually tuned into the Vlogbrothers, you can go way back and they have one of the funniest 50 jokes sets, 50 nerdy science jokes that will just leave you rolling. It's marvelous. Great videos, great brothers, great attitude. So glad you brought that to the group. So I just want to remind everybody, after the meeting, go out and take a look at the supermoon.
Oh.
Saw it a bit last night, just saw the night before's version, and it was gorgeous. So let's make a point of doing that tonight. My little deep dive is a little less wonderful. We are having 5 Sigma excursions in planet science, in global temperature, in Antarctica. We have a heat wave over Greenland that is without precedent. We are seeing global heat effects. We are now in a new universe, and it's not as welcoming to humans and the food supply as the universe in which we had lived. So I'm just glad to be here with you all, and we can do our little bit locally, while reminding each other that a lot of the things we've taken for granted all our lives really need to change, and change very quickly. And that includes really our entire fuel infrastructure. Because right now, what's baked in is pretty damn scary. And carrying on for another, 23 years ago, we had two presidential candidates who ran with the same platform. They were going to address climate. And the candidate who was elected didn't mean it. And we're here now. And the leadership of this nation matters, and the leadership of these groups matter. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Linda, did you have one?
Yes, actually, it was interesting when I was listening to what Anne was saying. A number of years ago, I attended a seminar weekend on Vashon Island about climate, and it was the first time that the native people had joined. Normally, they would not do that. They were not interested in working with white people, but that was the first year. And there was a number of very good ideas brought forward, but everybody was pretty comfortable in feeling that here in the Pacific Northwest, this was not going to be our issue. That here, and I believe it was Vermont, everybody was really convinced that these were the two areas in the country that were not going to be affected as badly as others. And look at what happened already. So quickly it's changed. And it's just fascinating to think of how complacent we were such a short time ago, and how fast we need to start backpedaling.
Hey, Tracy, did you have something?
Yeah, just kind of on the local theme, and this connects a lot of things that Corey does. Basically, the Lake Forest Park Water District is really interested in partnering with the city to develop a trail through McKinnon Creek. And it'll be not the one along the right-of-way road, but basically along a much more scenic one, I think, along the edge of the ravine. And it will also connect another neighborhood over on 187th, which will be kind of nice too. So I think, the Parks Board is working on a master plan for the parks, right? Not quite yet, okay. But the fact is that, I just want to emphasize that I really appreciate the fact that you guys work with both the Parks Board and with the Planning Commission and with the Tree Board on all these things that climate touches on, because it is so critical that we actually have kind of a unified message from the city. So, thanks.
Brian, we're just saying one thing that happened to us in August. I mean, in July, last month, 30 days, in the last 30 days ago.
Well, I was listening to Anne and Linda and getting depressed, so I thought I would
Sorry, Brian.
and put a smile on everybody's face. And can I share my screen? Corey, do I have that ability?
You should.
Because I want to talk about sex, which is obviously something that makes everybody happy. And I was out on Hope Island with my wife last week. Beautiful weather, such a small little paddle right off of Whidbey there. And it happened to be at the same time that the herring were spawning. And so walking along the shoreline in the evening was absolutely spectacular. We're walking along and there are just droves of fish coming up onto the shoreline. So if I can quickly just share just a real quick video that shows all these, and this is everywhere along the shoreline, are all these herring. Wow. And they're all wanting to just have sex. And I just thought that is what we kind of need every now and then, to just realize, yes, climate change is bad. Climate change is going to affect us all, but we all have to recognize some of the more industrial ways of thinking about life and going forward. So I thought this was a story of hope for me, because these herring are just going to spawn whether climate change is happening or not.
Well, thank you for the uplifting message, Brian.
My pleasure. I can stop sharing that. Sorry.
Yeah, well, for me, it was first of all, I want to say a number of you have asked me how Mark is doing, and he's just doing fine. Thank you very much. But the thing that the image for me for the last 30 days was the American women's soccer team, where I don't know much about soccer, but they kicked it. I don't even know if they pushed it in or kicked it, but somehow it's coming in through the air, and this woman does a header and makes a goal. I thought, we could do that. We're those people, right?
Right.
All right, and is there, okay, so the agenda is pretty loose. I did want to say that I think what we're going to do is sort of figure out where we are, what we need to do to reposition ourselves to move forward, get a few reports on the outreach that we've done, and then figure out what we really want to do with Picnic in the Park. Is there anybody who has any objections to the agenda?
No.
The other thing is we have meeting minutes. Is there anybody who objects to the meeting minutes?
Nope.
Okay, the meeting minutes are passed. Are there any citizen comments? No citizens. No citizens. We had an interesting citizen who sort of stumbled in last year. Did you follow up with her? And you did recover. Okay. All right. So I thought we'd have, if it's okay, we'll start with a few reports about the farmers market, the library project, and then go electric. So Tamara, do you want to talk about the farmers market?
Yeah, I mean, I was only there for the initial part of it, so I guess you guys who were there for the rest of it, if you want to weigh in on what you think, how it went.
Well, we didn't like our place. We like to be up in the front, it turns out. We got more traffic.
Yeah.
By the city hall.
But it was good to be next to the tables where the kids could draw.
Yes,
And the food.
and the food, yeah, so those were pluses. We had quite a few drawings. The children did, right, 10 or 15.
That's awesome. And it seemed like a lot of people took them, at least when I was there, took them with them to do them later.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we have to actually push a little bit in the sense that by being next to the tables, a lot of people sat down but wouldn't come over to our booth.
Right.
So if you went out to them, they were generally happy to hear what we had to say. So I think we have to be a little bit more pushy.
Yes, and I think there's also, I mean, it represents an opportunity to get some feedback, and we haven't really had the right kinds of. I mean, we've done outreach, which I think is an important piece, but we haven't gotten feedback about what they think the most important issues are.
We had some good conversations. Random people who walked up, so
We did.
that was,
We
which
did.
it was very interesting. I thought.
Yes, it's fun to be out there talking to people. And you want to talk about the library project, Tamara?
Yeah, sure. And I think, we had also talked about at the next one. Oh, well, I guess also for the Electrify one, how did that event go?
I think it went pretty well. It was, I would describe it as the perfect day in Lake Forest Park. And the Stewardship Foundation had a board meeting, and the Arts Council had a board meeting, and we had 30 people come. So we were pretty pleased with that. We had a doctor from Evergreen talk about, I guess he came with his position for social responsibility, talking about the health issues surrounding gas stoves. And I think people were interested in that and came away with it. A lot of people, we had one woman came up, my favorite story is one woman came up to the table and she said, I don't want to hear any about that climate stuff. just want to know about stoves. And then she came over and she said, I didn't mean to say I didn't want to hear about that climate stuff. I said, the climate stuff is important, but I did want to hear about stoves. So, and then we had Gary Hockey, who's a local resident, and I had been in a conversation with him saying I needed a chef to do some cooking on an induction stove, and he said, well, I'll do it. So he brought his little induction stove and did a demonstration of cooking scrambled eggs, fluffy scrambled eggs. And what was interesting was people could then touch the burner and it was cool. And people stayed and asked questions. So I thought it was, you were there too, right?
I wasn't there at the very end, but I was there for.
So there are two more that are coming up, and it's part of one of the strategies we talked about was working collaboratively with other cities. So this was just putting our toes in the water of this. The next one is in Kenmore on solar, and they're going to talk about community solar, which is an interesting. You had some of your students do some work on community solar.
With Anne, right?
Right, Anne and Mark on community
Yeah.
solar. I think there have been some legislative changes, but it'll be interesting to see. So that would be that, you know, people who live in houses that have shade could buy a share apparently. Right now, all you can do is buy a share if it's distributed through a nonprofit. So the electric company will only allow two distributors. But the second, both of those distributors could redistribute, but it's a very complex. But it's a good thing. It would be a good thing where we could find it. Yeah.
Just a couple of notes on the Go Electric thing. The main speaker was Dr. Mark Vossa, which some of you know from Citizens Climate Lobby, right? Yeah. And then the other person who was there that I thought we might invite to our meetings here is Nina Rasmussen, who's the Climate Action Plan Program Manager for Kenmore. And she's really sharp. She actually did this for Wichita. So they actually got a fairly good person to do their climate plans. So I think she's got a really good perspective on how to implement, which is one of the questions we were going to have to consider at some point, right? So yeah.
And then the third program will be in Shoreline, and that'll be on heat pumps. And we've been collecting some feedback from people, and we made it. We forgot to say turnover, so like the over on the corrected them.
Hey, Sarah.
People only filled out one half of it.
Sarah, do you remember when is that solar panel one again? Do we have that? I'm sorry, I should have had that in front of me, but I don't.
August 18th.
August 18th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thursday is August 17th is Thursday. That's on my calendar.
Yeah.
The 18th is
Yeah,
Friday.
it's August 17th,
17th.
Okay.
September 19th.
And we'll send out another, I think Shoreline has a press release, right? They were doing their press releases. I mean, Kenmore. Ken. So we'll send some stuff out to our list and to all of you as well. It'll be at the hangar. In Shoreline, I mean, Kenmore.
And then Sarah, you said we at our event about the induction stoves that we were asking for feedback from people, like what sort of events they would like us to have in the future. Did we get any responses?
Well, no, that was what I was trying to say was I had a little sheet, a third of a sheet, and that question was on the back of it and people didn't turn it over.
Okay.
So we corrected it
Yeah.
to write over on it.
Mhm.
Just turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that could be something for a picnic in the park. I think if we could have some way, or maybe we like, people like the interactive things, maybe we could do like the sticky note sort of thing. Like, what what sort of event would you like us to host? And they could put like sticky notes on there.
Great idea. I think that's a great idea. I want to I actually want to come back to, you were going to talk about the library, Tamara.
Yeah, so for the picture that we did, like the art contest, I don't know, what are we going to call it? It's not a contest. yet, really. I mean, I like Mimi's idea, like maybe next time we do it, we can have people put in a raffle and they can get some kind of climate friendly prize. But for this time, it's just to be displayed with the art submission. So Sarah had reached out to the LFP library and they offered to host, to have like a table, a display table for 2 weeks. And yeah, so that'll be cool. And then we can reach out to like the schools and the PTAs, because the timing works really well because it'll be right when school is coming back in session.
So did you get the email from them today? They were.
Uh,
looking for dates.
Yes, yeah. So I responded. I copied you on it, Sarah.
Okay, terrific. So sometime or another, we're gonna have these crayon drawings that we need to put up someplace. Maybe we'll take over the lobby of City Hall. Corey said, oh, that'd be great. Okay, I want to shift now to our implementation strategy. And I want to begin by saying, whatever you did or didn't do, it's absolutely fine. And that what we're going to do now is kind of move forward. And I wanted to share my screen and show you what we were working on. And this was the piece that this was the document that Dana created for us. It began to look at how we would what we had said we wanted to do was using the Kenmore model. We had written a significant amount of narrative about our objectives of what we wanted to do in our 5 areas. And the suggestion was that that it was too dense, and that what would be helpful for people is if we could have a more compact and easy to read description of what we wanted to do. And this was the modeling again after Kenmore. We would take the narrative that we had, and then we would we created this action code, but as I'm right here, the action code, it's just a number apparently. So we just say action code TR would be for transportation 1. And then we would take what is the action, the description of the action, and then how is that going to be accomplished, and as brief as possible. And then we could, and then there was, this using a scale of 1 to 3 from minimal to costly. How costly would it be to the city? How many carbon equivalents are reduced? And how hard is it? This is really, because we're not scientists, well, I'm not a scientist, some of those are just guesses about it. And I think that would be different than what maybe Kenmore, who had the resources of Cascadia doing it. We have to just kind of guess, I think. So
Sarah, I'm sorry, where is this document?
this document is called Lake Forest Park CAP Strategies and Actions Table in Google, but it was a Google page or a Google
sheet.
A Google
And-
sheet.
And Corey emailed it, right to the link to everybody. Back in the.
Tamara, did you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for this one, I know we have cost to city. I know we talked about this before, like, do we always want cost to city? And then do we also want to have like cost to, the individual resident, or in cost to LFP household? And then some of them would have a cost to the city, some would have a cost to household. Some might have both, some might just have one. It seems like we're kind of missing out.
And then I just said I just interpreted it as cost. So do we need it to speak to city? It could be cost, and then it's just relative to whatever the action is.
Sure.
Or is that?
So is this spreadsheet based on Kenmore's?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's something that that Kenmore's was kind of missing right? Was just, it didn't break it up between like cost to the city and then cost to the, resident to, because it's kind of two different things. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there isn't. Because a lot of these items, right, are things that we want the individual residents to do. It's not just all things for the city to do.
It's all relative and or it's our feeling about what is right, 1 to 3, right? I mean, I thought
Yeah,
it was
so it's
great
like that.
scale.
That King
Mhm.
County tool that I was
Yeah.
looking at, it's all a scale of 1 to 5. And it could be very helpful if the person who fills it out knows a lot about how the city works.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a scale of 1 to 3, like it's not very granular. Not gonna get. I don't know, I guess, so is the goal here to just try to identify what are the best buys, the low hanging fruit, I think.
I think that really it's how do we, yes and no. Yes, we want to do the easy stuff because they're easy, but yes, we want to do the thing that reduces the carbon the most because it's the most urgent, right?
Well, that's what a tool like this, it's going to weigh these things and it's going to tell you, okay, this is your best bet. And so, yeah, are we trying to use it to decide what we're going to tackle first?
We'll
What
get
are
the
we
most bang
using
for our buck.
for?
I think this is where the person over at Kenmore might be able to help us, because remember, she has exactly this document except for Kenmore, right? So she has almost exactly the same numbers on all the projects. And so it'd be interesting to see how she wants to implement that, because you're right. I mean, for me, it was kind of obvious, go for like the stuff that's easy to do and low cost, right? But those are things that are generally outreachy and they don't really have a big effect. The problem is that once you start getting the ones that have a big effect, it starts to cost. And so the question is, how do you minimax that sort of thing, right? And it's tough. I don't know what, I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Well, I don't either. What, anybody have, what is it other people's senses about that? You know what I think we ought to do? I think we ought to fill it out as best we can and then come back and fix it.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay. And, yeah. Tracy.
So when you say fill it out, put the numbers in?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if we're gonna go in both feet with basically being super lazy, let's just take Kenmore's numbers, because they're not gonna be a whole lot different than ours. And the point is, we look at them to make sure they make sense for us, right? Because there are some differences, but by and large, I don't think the numbers are gonna be different.
Yeah, for most cities, like the priorities are going to be the same.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's not the like actual dollar amount numbers, right? These are just the scale numbers you're talking about.
Yeah, because
So
basically,
why doesn't it kind of get included in the difficulty versus like trying to figure out the cost? Because the difficulty is like part of the cost. So maybe just have one column.
Right.
Well,
I think some things can be complex, but not expensive, right? If they require a lot of people thinking together about something, right? So that's.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I don't necessarily know if the cost is even important to put on here.
well, it could be, there could be things that are like budgetarily constrained versus things that are constrained by like, what is the public tolerance for this? And
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences between Kenmore and Lake Forest Park is the source of our electricity. I think they have less power derived from Seattle City Light, therefore less hydropower. And so that will shift some of their priorities and also some of the cost benefit ratios. But I think we can start with I like Tracy's idea. We have a good wheel. Why don't we start with that? And then let's adjust from there and have explanations for adjustments rather than starting with a pristine new document and trying to create something based on, again, these aren't strict science. This is ranges and ballparks. And I think as long as we are internally consistent and recognize the differences with some of the specific issues between us and Kenmore, we can get to a perfectly good endpoint and with less pain than if we just tried to start from ground zero.
I'm a little confused by what you two are saying. So are you saying we shouldn't use the work that we did, but we should just go take Kenworth?
No.
No, okay. We should, so this is what I'm thinking that the assignment is, and so help me if I'm, so this one on transportation was, we have pages of things and we did one of them, as a sample. And I saw, so the next one is Tracy and Matt. We're gonna work on the environment and land use. So there's something that's already written, right? You guys wrote something. So you would take that and then look at what the comparable piece in Kenmore is. Is that right? Right? How is Kenmore gonna help you? That's what I. How is Kenmore's number
I
gonna?
want to hear Matt's thoughts on this.
When I look at this, I just see a different version of that King County tool, which again, like it has defaults in it for like most cities. And, like Anne was saying, this whole thing is a ballpark. It's just trying to start to order things. And so you could take Kenmore's, you could take the generic King County city, you say, okay, what are the 5 or 10 or 20 top things that are the best buys? And just talk about like, okay, does this make sense? Like, let's drop this one out. We've still got 9 things that are probably going to be the best first things for us to look at. And this is all just trying to decide like, what do we want to work on? It's not addressing any of like, how are we going to do that? I think, like we're talking about cost and stuff, like obviously there are things, we can just change code, like change the city's codes. Those are probably going to be the easiest to implement.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Cost, yeah, like, but again, this goes back to that, like,
Right.
cost wise, they might not cost a lot, but like, is there gonna be a big backlash for some of those things? But yeah, I think that there, this is another tool that we can use, but like we already, there's a bunch of cities that we can ask to get a list of like, these are the top 10 best buys, start here. I think that the big question is not what those 10 things are, it's how are we going to start tackling them?
But I think we have to write them out first. I mean, we have to have them first, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that whatever they are, they have to be a piece of public information, and then people can say, if you lost your mind, take that one, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean,
So again, I'm gonna ask this question because how are you gonna proceed? If we say, Tracy and Matt, take this,
I've already-
yes?
Right.
All right, in the meantime, Brian has something.
Go ahead, Brian.
So first of all, Corey, can you please resend me this link? I'm so bad at not keeping links, but anyways, so to add to Matt's point, I kind of, the more and more I read the Kenmore action plan, it's all pretty, but it's a joke. And I tell you, they did not, obviously they didn't do any of that, right? That was all done by a company, and they're following the King County or the what's that called? Shoot, the assessor's version of that. We have such a unique environment compared to them. We have such a unique city. I did these tables sort of working on my own with the natural systems, and I was just amazed by how simple and ridiculous their Kenmore's plan was with their natural systems, because it just doesn't cover anything that is important. And so I think what we have to do is take what we've written and sure, use this model, but we really need to be much more diligent about thinking about how is it really pertain to Lake Forest Park, because we really have this amazing city that's covered a lot by canopy, where we're going to be able to deal far better with climate action than any other city. we have a lot of area that's still fairly undeveloped. I mean, I say undeveloped, obviously it's all been logged at one point in time, but pretty fairly undeveloped that we should be fighting tooth and nail to try and keep. Obviously, I'm speaking mainly from the natural systems point of view, but I just feel like we can use this as a model, but what we got to do is really get in the trenches and think about how each of these categories, each of these little subsets that they have specifically pertain to Lake Forest Park. And I know that's a lot of work, but I don't know. I just feel like we'd be doing a lot of injustice if we didn't do that.
All right, so Brian, I got a question for you then.
Yeah.
This is Kenmore's natural systems and
Yeah,
water.
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So you mean we need different goals or more specific goals than what they've got?
Oh,
here?
very specific goals. We need way more. These are canned. These are canned responses on how you deal with the environment. And I just found it, this to me is a company that's just filling in the table. That's all it is. It's not specific to any city. It's just, this could be for Renton. This could be for, Oakland, California. It doesn't matter. It's just canned. So I just find that we need a lot more thought into how we fill in this table.
So what you're saying is that we need something like, for instance, under the short name, it would literally be something like restoring the salmon habitat at the Lion and McMaclear Creek mouths, that level.
Well, yeah, if I can show you, sorry, if I can share my screen real quick. I mean, I'll wait if you want me to wait. I can show you what I've kind of worked on. So what I've kind of put together, if I can find my document. So I kind of followed their plan where they talk about forest water ecosystem. Here's our goal system set up. And I know it's not as pretty as the way that they had it all set up. And so when it comes down to strategies, to me, allocate resources to trees that are more effective in mitigating emissions, so we
Can you make it bigger, Brian? We can't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Oh, I know I can do. Sorry.
Turn your volume up.
But I think it's the system.
I think it's
Oh,
the system.
system.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
there you go.
So this is kind of canned off of there, but so for forest and that, so I broke ours up into forest versus the watershed systems, because we have to address them differently. You can't just put them all. I mean, you look at Kenmore's plan, they talk about addressing tree canopy, but you look at their specific goals, there's nothing about tree canopy in their specific goals. They never address that. So it's like, where did, who wrote this? So I just, this is a lot based on what I wrote. So I just kind of put what I wrote previously, which was, as you guys put it, long-winded and way more detailed. And I kind of put it into
Brian, we can't.
The volume here is at max. Can you turn your mic gain up a little bit, please?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I might be running out of battery. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, I'll just hold it. How's that? So what part did you miss? No, I'm just
We
kidding.
heard it, but it was hard.
Okay. I took a lot of, I did a lot of writing, which was very verbose and long-winded. And I know that was something that you guys were saying that we needed to cut down on. So I kind of put it into this table format. So just being much more specific about how we deal with first of our forest canopy. We need to have, sorry, this is probably too big. Now you're getting too much of a screen. So allocate resources to urban tree maintenance, address climate change inequities based on social. So none of this is addressed in the Kenmore action plan. They don't talk, they talk about it, but they don't talk about how they're going to do it. So this is the kind of details that I'm thinking. I mean, obviously, again, it's still a little bit verbose. I just didn't have the time to really whittle it down, but I'll send this out to everybody. But this to me, and this is for the urban waterways. So recognize, protect waterways contributing to both Lion and Water Creek, prevent significant runoff, establish stormwater control measures, restore geomorphology through channel rehabilitations, maintain riparian environments, restoration of stream hyperitic zones, and reintroduction of native kokanee, which I think is still hugely important to keeping our streams healthy. So that's just a kind of way that I think we have to get more specific, but I don't know.
Did you have any other category? You had the category of the title and then the description, the goal, the title and the description.
So
Priorities. What are these? What
these
do
are the
we-
priorities. So these are the very general priorities. And this is kind of copying a lot of what Kenmore did. And I didn't address it and how it's going to be done in the because I didn't have the time to really think about that. But then when it gets down to the actual strategies that they had, those little table strategies they had, that's where I became much more specific. And
So Brian, these could be imported into the document that Dana created, right?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
I can do that.
Again, what I'm hearing, this is what I'm hearing, is that we want to use, to begin to fill these categories out. We have 5 categories. We want to use what we've written in terms of developing our own local and unique, but we want to then check back with the folks who have done it in Kenmore and, for example, and in King County, just to begin to see that to use all the resources that are available to us to develop this. Is that right?
I think, Brian,
Checking back is fine. I don't find the more like I was like Matt was just saying, I don't find a lot of I find a value in the way that Kenmore did it because it kind of gives us a model. But again, they didn't write any of that. That's all done by a company that they outsource to, and it doesn't really pertain to anything to Kenmore. It could be from any city, in my view. The more and more I look at it, it just doesn't seem like it's actually a specific for Kenmore.
Okay.
Maybe you guys just combine that like cost and difficulty into like CAC like ranking, like climatic ranking, and then it can go into you think the cost or difficulty, a little description, but it really like I don't think trying to rank cost. Okay.
Well, I think we need to define what the cost, what is, I mean, that also that whole ranking thing is hugely different between Kenmore because they have a different budget than we do. So obviously your little stars and your little things you're going to give them are going to be quite different between Lake Forest Park, which doesn't have a budget at all. So, how we rank things is going to be much different.
What are you saying, Tracy?
Oh, I don't know which thing I was saying, but I think, Brian, I think you've hit it on the head. I really like what you've done with the natural system stuff. But you know what? I think a hybrid approach might be the best, because for instance, I'm looking at municipal operations and things like electrify the city's fleet, expand public electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah.
Or generic, yeah, right. It fits almost every city.
You're right.
But the fact is, is there anything specifically Lake Forest Park that we're gonna put a spin on that? I don't think we are. So I think there are some things that are really specific to us and some things that aren't. And I just noticed you pointed out, Kenmore is not paying any attention whatsoever to their canopy, which of course is a hugely important thing here. So what we have to do is identify those things that are uniquely us and make sure they're in our plan. But the other stuff can be boilerplate, and boilerplate has a negative connotation, I know, but it doesn't have to, right? It's just literally the baseline that we can use.
Yeah, my apologies. I was speaking mainly from the natural systems point of view.
That's really
I hadn't read their entire, gone through, it just seemed like kind of glossed over, but you're right. There are definitely some things we can pull from, especially from the other categories.
I mean, I think, I don't know, to your point, like installing, more like electric charging stations, like it would be right at the town center. I mean, it still is kind of a little bit more specific. Like then we get into like the planning and then like the development that's going to be going on at the town center that's in the future. So like, how do we make sure that whatever is getting built, that there are going to be electric charging stations at the town center? So yeah, I kind of like looking at all of this kind of through, I mean, to your point, Tracy, it might not all have a local component, but looking at it all through that local lens, I think is important.
Okay. So again, I'm going to say this, we have assigned people to each of those components, right? So Ann and I are on transportation. We have all those. They're on that chart. And what we're gonna ask you to do is meet in smaller groups, fill out that chart, and then we can come back and look at the whole thing. And the intention there, I believe, is that when we're telling people about what needs to happen, it's simple. It's simpler than the long narrative that we had. It says this goal, these actions, this, and we'll figure out this cost thing. I think maybe combining it and saying on a 1 to 5, you know, a wild guess about the cost may be valuable. I'd say fill out what Dana said there and then we'll change it. Yes, Dan.
I'm big on starting somewhere and then we can discuss and adjust.
Yes.
But I really like what Brian's doing and
Yeah.
just start in
Yeah.
and put words on paper and put numbers, you know, make estimates as to where you think, and then let's talk about it with a Lake Forest Park perspective.
Okay. Are we good to do that? And can we meet in subcommittees, subgroups before our next meeting? That's the question next. And now and the other thing is that Linda is now by herself because Jessica's on sabbatical. And the young people are not here. Well, I'll work with you, Linda. We'll work.
What's your category? What's
Natural environment, right?
Linda's?
Linda's, what's the category?
Oh, God, I can't remember the name of it now.
Okay, I got
It's
it.
like consumption and solid waste.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Stop sharing this one. Share this one, share this one. Okay. Share, sorry. I can't get out of Kenmore. Get this back to me, please.
You're there.
Oh, okay,
Just that it's on its way.
Okay. okay. So, Tracy and Matt are doing this one. No, but okay, it's not displaying, which means I can't move it. Tracy. Tracy fixed my computer.
Yeah. So this is.
Oh.
We don't want.
Right.
It's all grayed out. Oh.
Okay,
You're back to it's like neutral.
what? Okay, no, I'm not. No.
Sorry, my bad.
I love technology.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so Ann and I are gonna work on transportation, and we're gonna look at what we've already written, then we're gonna do some work. Tracy and Matt are gonna do built environment. Solid waste and consumption, Linda and I will do that.
Okay.
I'm sitting at home, so for the next 3 weeks, so I'm good. The natural environment and who's this?
That's Brian.
Brian and who?
Dana.
And Dana, okay. And community reliance and preparedness is, so is everybody got an assignment?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we have in our fabulous, do we need to, can the first name in each of those make sure that the meeting happens? So, Mimi, on this one, make sure that meeting happens?
Yeah, I'll talk to Cameron tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. What we had in our wildest dreams was that we would have something to show people at Picnic in the Park, which is when?
September.
September 9th. Will we have had a meeting?
Yeah.
When is that meeting?
The
5th. Okay, so the question is, I think this is, how many people do you think come to this? Is this a really good opportunity for outreach? So the question is,
I think picnic in the park, you get, I mean, it seemed like there's a good turnout, but you also get people from a lot of other communities as well.
well, we'll just,
That was true at the farmer's market
yeah.
too.
Yeah,
So I think I'm struggling to understand because it sounds like you want to get these actions scored so that we can present something at Picnic in the Park. And I'm not sure what the goal is of showing that to people? Is it to tell people these are the things that we're gonna do?
This is what we're, I think it is, these are the things that we're planning to put in a plan that we bring to the council. So that a piece of this is, we have to get this plan approved by the city council. And I think the more times we're out in the public saying, this is our plan, it's advantageous to us, but maybe.
So are we saying, here's some of the ideas we've had in a structured way, and what do you think?
Yes,
Is that kind of the approach?
Yeah.
To pick
Yes.
this part? Okay.
so we might have, what if we had 5 big poster boards that somehow summarized each one of each of these areas? I don't know, maybe I'm just jumping, I'm anxious to move.
Why don't we decide at our next meeting what makes sense? Because
Yeah,
at
we're
that
not sure
point,
what-
we'll be looking at where we're at and see if we have something that can in any form be shared. It may not be,
Well, what did you guys do at the farmer's market that'd be different than the weekend park?
We would have not only this is what I think, we would have, at all of these events, we said, these are the major sources of carbon in Lake Forest Park. And then some point or another, we're gonna have to say, and this is what we're doing about it.
But why not just be out there pushing education that you guys already know? If you want a presence at the park and this stuff isn't ready to be voted on.
If we introduce these 5 categories with a brief description of what each of them are, and had conversations with people about that, that's kind of solve people. And have some of Brian's specific, I know that I don't have expertise like Brian has in like waste.
Yeah.
I couldn't be as specific. And I think there's probably some categories that none of us can be that way. And that we're gonna have to hire, that's what I put in, is that we're gonna have to hire a contractor or somebody to help us with policy, help us with, to be specific. Because I don't think we have all the expertise we need in-house. But if the goal of the picnic in the park is to get feedback, or is it to give
Well, I don't know,
information?
I don't know.
What is our goal? What should the goal be?
Well, and I think just to show the community, like, here's what we've done so far. Like, we've taken your feedback, we've used the survey, we've been getting together for a couple of years now, and here's, what we think we want to work on. What do you guys think? I mean, even if we don't really get any feedback, at least it shows that we are going out into the community and we're asking for their feedback. I think that we're just going out there and asking for their feedback is almost even more important than getting feedback in return, because we really want to be able to show that we're doing this for the community, with the community, especially when the council, goes to try to get it passed. They want to be able to show, all the times that we went out there to the community and asked them for their feedback.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, all right, well, I'm backing off what I said to you, Ann. We'll just figure it out. We'll go to the meeting and then we'll figure it out for the in 5 days. Does that make sense? Sort of what we want to put up for people.
To see what kind of progress we make on this.
Yeah.
This kind of thing, and
Yeah.
then see what, and then decide on that day what to make a poster of.
Right.
And I think we can also strategize during our comm team call too.
I'm sorry, Tamara, I didn't hear you.
I said we can also strategize during our comm team call that we have before our next meeting also.
Right, that Matt's gonna call.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Okay, my anxiety's rolled over there. Okay, sounds like we're good to go.
You guys will have a booth.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. That's all I have on my agenda. What else did I have? What's this else?
Next steps.
Next steps. That we did next steps, right? All right. So let's just So I'm just saying, well, we're gonna meet in teams and we're gonna fill that stuff out. Tamara's gonna call the library and figure the children's stuff out. The
Tamara?
poster,
We have like a bunch of leftovers, I'll leave them at the front desk. Perfect.
Cool. Thanks, Corey.
are there other things that we said we would do?
Can I ask Tracy, because you guys scoffed when I said planners committee. So Ken Moore, you suggested inviting Ken Moore's.
Have an action plan.
And that is probably a good bridge to figuring out some of the questions that, and answering the spaces, but we don't have expertise, what do you do? So that could be something that would be good to happen sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of gaps.
Yes.
So what would you have this person do? Come to what?
Do we have anything to show them?
I think when we have a draft of this thing, we can say,
Yeah, what do you
we
think?
will have gaps, things that need help.
So for instance, I want to pose kind of a hypothetical to you guys. Can you scroll a bit back to that my section? Because I've been basically copying stuff over from Kenmore plan straight into this thing. And right there, stop. Okay, so one of the strategies, we're doing built environments and land use. Strategy 3 is about build strategically, which is definitely land use. Check out BE 3.2. Prioritize dense mixed-use transit-oriented developments and affordable housing. And of course, the action is accomplished by upholding the Growth Management Act. I have to amend that to include the most recent House Bill 1110 requirements as well. But the point is basically, there's no cost technically to doing this, right? This is just an action of City Council. Okay.
Right.
But in terms of political cost and just trying to get people to buy onto this, you remember how well Prop 1 did, which was basically trying to do kind of the same thing, but with money involved. And so the point that I'm making here is, do we not basically worry about political costs? We just put in things that we think should be in a plan like this, or do we take into account things like that?
I think that would just go into like for that difficulty level, it would have a lot of difficulty stars. I
Okay,
think like the political cost, we could
okay.
take into
So
the
yeah.
difficulty level.
But you see, my question is, this is generic, it's not just Matt and my section, but all of you are gonna run into this, which is, how do you know this is the action we need to do, right? And basically, because there's sometimes a moral aspect, sometimes an ethical aspect to it, and just judgment call, just basically put it out there, see what other people think.
Yes.
I think that's where we're at now, right?
Okay.
Is sort of put something out there and then have a conversation.
I mean, I'm okay with that, I just want to make sure that that's, everybody's okay with that, so, yeah.
Okay, and let me ask this, do you think it's possible that we could get this done a week before our meeting, so people had a week to read it, even though it's Labor Day and you might be doing something more fun?
This is fun.
Oh, Tracy's gonna do them all. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to try and do it a week before September 5th, so end of August. And then we'd have a chance to look at them, and we can, on this, can we make comments on this? Like we can on the other, yeah, Google Docs?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this. So I could, can I put a comment?
Right click on it as well, you see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Easy to do. What?
You already commented on it.
I'm so good. Okay. I don't know how to use this tool. Someday, pretty soon I'm gonna get really good at it and we'll be done. Okay. Okay. So once we read through it, once they're up, we can all make comments on them, and then at our meeting. And it might be, those of you who are not here in person, is it possible that you could be here in person? Is there a limitation? It seems like we.
I can arrange that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm struggling a lot with the utility of this. So, so like I said, I took a look at the King County, and the reason I didn't want to fill out the King County thing myself was because there are like 100 some things that you could do. And like there's utility in saying, okay, well, there's 100 things here. We're not going to do all of them. Let's try to whittle it down a bit. But here you're saying, okay, we've had teams work on different sections of the climate plan, and each team has come up with, 4, 5, 6 different domains and suggestions. And now you're saying, let's put those that our team members have already decided are worth pursuing into this thing and then rank them. And so I could understand if we had already passed the climate plan and we were trying to come up with like, okay, what are we going to do first? But like, are we going to then cut some things out of the climate plan because they don't score high enough? Like, I don't understand how this is going to be useful to get the plan passed.
These aren't being like ranked against each other, are they?
That seems like what we're doing, right? Because you're listing our things and then you're
So
scoring.
that's because we've gotten granular, right? So if we get really specific, but we stay, so, right, there's this balance between what's important, the category of things that are important, and then the details, right? The details go on and on, that's what you're saying, in terms of specific actions.
Well, and adding on to what Mimi said, I think it was a menu. It's basically the idea is that we throw everything out there and let city council or whoever our final plan person is gonna be to decide on implementation.
I mean, realistically, this is a giant to-do list for the city, and when funds come in, they'll take off. Check those off, like, we're not gonna, there's gonna be grant money coming in for like EV stations are like probably the next thing, so it might not be ranked very high anywhere, but that's just where we get the money, so it's more about what we can realistically do versus.
I guess, yeah, so I guess the thing is, my understanding was that we were like, we're gonna write up the climate plan, we're gonna have everybody work on their section. We're going to try to make it cohesive, and then we're going to like give it to the city council. And what it feels like is like now we're pausing, we're taking a step back, and we're filling out this tool. And it's like, well, if we all wrote out these sections, and we all thought each of these things was worth being in the plan, why are we taking a step back to fill out this tool if we were going to put all those things in front of the city council anyway?
Because it's easier to read for the public.
This forced me to frame how things were worded in a certain way that was better, right? What's an action, which we still had trouble because we're a lot of education stuff and the thing we're doing. But that's one benefit of this, it's forcing you to structure it in a certain way. Not necessarily to eliminate anything. I think so much of what we had was valuable, right? That we've already created. So I don't think the point was to change that, but more to frame it, to change maybe how it was worded. For consistency.
Yeah, I can see there being a benefit, but there's also a cost of like, well, is it worth us spending another month or two filling out this tool? And then that's another month or two that we are not really doing anything, but while we're waiting to get this in front of city council.
Still doing something. Still worthwhile.
It was a useful exercise for me, and it's nowhere near done what I did. But I tried to put something up there that could spur conversation about how do we do this, because I really don't know how to accomplish it.
Can I add that, first of all, Matt, I don't think you should take anything out. And if anything, be over listing, because we want to make sure that our job is to try and figure out all the different avenues that our city council can't think of because they just haven't done the research. And if you don't want to rank them, then you could, maybe there's got to be a vague way we can say to be determined or something, or depending on available funds. I don't know. There's got to be a way that you don't have to rank it against each other. I get what you're saying. We don't want to say, we don't want the city council to say, oh, here's some picking, here's some low-lying fruit, even though it may not give us a lot of benefits. We don't want to discard that or have others being discarded that might be, things that we feel are more valuable. But Yeah, there's got to be a way that you can kind of just, rather than putting a number there, you could put something like, I don't know, to be determined, or to be, TBD.
I mean, it's interesting, I think, to have it like that. I mean, to your point, it's not, I don't think it's meant to be okay, this is what we're gonna do first. We still have to actually like price all these things out and do all of that. But I just think it's interesting to kind of compare and to look at these things like, oh, okay, well, here's something that's not really gonna do a lot. It's not gonna make a big impact to the carbon. And here's something that is gonna really make a big impact to carbon. And just, I think it's interesting just to look at those things, not necessarily, I don't think the city is going to then be like, okay, like rank it like that, because kind of to Corey's point, like there's other grants that are coming in and other things. But I don't know, I just thought it was interesting looking at the Kenmore plan, and other people might think it's interesting. I think it might be important, to your point, Matt, maybe to write in some kind of caveat to all of that, right? Like this is an estimation. This is not meant to be like, you should take everything that has the, most bang for your buck and start there, because there are going to be grants coming in and this all fluctuates and changes. And so maybe we just need to add a disclaimer to it.
I think that's absolutely right. I think we will have to put a disclaimer when we say we're not the consultants. We're community people who are doing the best we can on some of these issues. But I'm trying to figure out. I don't like the idea. I don't like the notion that I don't think we're taking a step backwards, but I heard what you said. You thought we were, so.
Well, I think that. Yeah, like we can put it in the plan, like Kenmore did, like, hey, these are a way of prioritizing things. But I think that if we've already had our team members draw up all these points and like, these are things that we think we should do. I think that scoring them is going to be more useful after we've, had the city council, after we're in that phase where it's like, okay, the city council has approved this, and now we are the implementation team, and now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do first, or what we're going to prioritize. And it's like, I don't want to delay putting it in front of city council to do something that's really going to be helpful after it's passed. We're looking at, okay, like which part of this plan are we doing first?
So you're saying just don't have the rank, the last three columns, that the other part is useful, but maybe not.
No, I think that the ranking can be useful in determining what to do first. But if we've already decided that all of these things are worth including in the plan, then let's just put the plan in front of the city council. Does that? And then worry about what order we're going to do them in while they're thinking about it or whatever. Like, let's not delay putting it in front of them so that we can.
I thought that this was a way to help us write the text, be sort of coherent. Or is that not? I mean,
Maybe it is. I don't.
Dana
I don't
then
understand.
stopped, and she had done what she could, and I think the next thing, what do we do next? Because she got stuck with the implementation part of it, was how do you present that part of it? So I
I
felt
don't
like,
want a complete draft to council. And I think a complete draft, and I think this is part of the draft. I think this helps break it out.
so this isn't the plan, this is a way of presenting some information from the plan, is how I.
But it sounds like it's part of it that needs to be in there before we.
I think it is. I think we have to say what what preceded this was demographics and history and blah, blah, blah. This is what we're saying the action is in the climate action plan. This is what we think the action is. And we're asking the council to approve these actions.
I think
Okay.
taking another month or two is to get it right, is perfectly acceptable. You're still doing work, you're still, I think, making progress.
And the other thing is we can do anything we want in education. In the educational arena, we can set up. Apparently, Corey doesn't even think we have to talk to the council, we just go do it. So, I mean, if we want to do some educational programs, we can do those.
And I think we have all these things in our mind, you know, kind of the direction that we need to go. So when we are out and we need community buy-in, and that's kind of why we're sitting out there talking to
Yeah.
people, right? Is trying to get people on board.
Yeah.
So that when we do bring some of the things that are more controversial, they believe in what we've done
Mhm.
and that they were part of it. So
Okay. So if you get stuck with the ranking, don't get stuck there, just move on. That's my new advice. But we'll come and we'll figure it out as a group.
Yeah, I understand better now. And thank you everyone for listening to me, not understand.
which is the ranking
while,
that you.
so
I
I
never
appreciate-
thought of it as-
Sorry about that.
I never thought of it as 1, 2, 3, if anything was more important than any other thing out there. That these were just the things we were gonna do. So I'm not sure where.
Well, my understanding is like putting the numbers in,
On the
Is-
right hand side.
yeah, is to
Okay.
quantitate, like, okay, well, if this one has a 2.6 average and this one has a 2.5 average, then maybe let's do that one first. That was my understanding of what the numbers are for. And if we want to put this whole thing in the plan, like Kenmore, then like, absolutely, let's do it. I just wanted to understand, like, is this important? Do we feel like this is important to our plan? And the answer is yes. And so I'm like, okay, let's do it.
All right. Before we go, there was one more thing that we had said we were gonna do in terms of reviewers, and Corey and Mimi and Tamara were gonna look at some people who might review this. So,
Yeah, I'll give my update. So she is gonna send me a proposal and I'm still waiting on her proposal. And that will include her looking at our climate action plan from a like environmental justice perspective, and then her student was going to do a graphic design piece.
I was mistaken as to exactly the focus of this person. So I held back on reaching out.
okay. And did you reach Cascade yet? Okay. She said no, and she's gonna do it. Okay. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay. You know, August is the best month in Seattle, so we should enjoy ourselves. Okay, meeting adjourned. I will call you Linda and I will call you Ann.
Okay.